listen to music today, Juby?
Daily. Every night I take in music for maybe at 12,
Bobby,
14 hours.
he sells music.
Yeah, I sell music in the days and I run a beer garden at nights. And I play music from 7:30 right back to 4, 5, 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. So I'm with it. Look at my teeth. You see music on it. I live music and I speak music. Music is my occupation. Music on my teeth. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 5 minutes. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please find your seats.
Hey, explorers, we need you. What started last year in various cities around the globe will come to the next level this year. The Allianz Explorer Series 2019. 4 cities, 4 topics, endless possibilities. What will the future be about? Meet the experts and explore in Shenzhen, Berlin, New York, Munich. How the world will change. New York, July 11, 2019. Exploring sustainable urbanization. How can we design our cities to foster more sustainable ways of living? Explore with us.
Hello and welcome to the Allianz Explorer Series New York edition here at the beautiful MoMA PS1. We're super excited to have all of you guys join us tonight. And originally we had planned to have this event outdoors. However, we thought that it would be better that we get cozy in here and avoid the rain and stay dry. But I promise you, this will be a fantastic evening because we have great speakers, experts and leaders that are working in the field of sustainability with us tonight. We have an esteemed audience with us and also our friends joining us on the live stream. My name is Tony Gui and I'll be your host for the evening as we explore future cities, specifically sustainable urbanization, and looking into the question, how can we design our cities to foster more ways for sustainable living? And this is such an important question right now and topic, as our cities are starting to feel a lot of the pressures from rapid urbanization, and it's expected that more and more people are going to live in our cities, move to the cities, and we're also facing the challenge of climate change, affordable living, affordable housing, and just a couple of weeks ago, New York City has passed the Climate Mobilization Act as a step forward to reduce CO2 emissions in our building. Tonight, we have a lot of great experts and leaders that are going to share very diverse perspectives on this topic. We have views from the United Nations, the New York office, from MoMA, from Allianz Real Estate, from Eric Corey-Fried with us tonight. So this is going to be a fantastic evening. We also welcome you guys to stay engaged. Shiva Bratner on stage, who's going to share a little bit more about the vision around the Allianz Global Explorer program and also the Allianz Explorer Series. So let's give a round of applause for Florian.
Thank you, Tony. So maybe really just very briefly that you understand why we are doing it, because we believe that's always important. So the reason why we started this Explorer Series is that there's an we were founded in 1890 when it was a pretty disruptive time, so there was new technologies coming, it was changing society, a lot of questions. But we have been founded because entrepreneurs started to understand the new ways of transportation, the new ways of shipping goods, and so we have been founded as a transportation insurance company. So if we look now into today, we see similar things. We see a lot of disruption, we see a lot of questions which are out there. And now as an insurance and investment company, we would have 2 options. We could either sit there passive and waiting and thinking what happened and then playing the game, or we really want to understand what is happening and being an active partner. So the full idea is that we started actively, that we are active here on stage, that we learn by that, and that was Tony's side and really also starting to build connections. That's what when we talk about explorers, is about not us, it's not Allianz exploring, it's about you. So starting from outstanding speakers and very, very different perspectives, it's you as an audience. As we know, a very diverse, very interesting audience. So it's really starting, what is the view on what could happen? How can we also drive that in a way that's positive? So the notion of sustainability is, for us, also not just a word. We have a very long-term view on things. But we believe that's also something we have to look into now. So the notion is really to understand and then to start together, what does it mean? So we started nearly 1.5 years ago. We do this kind of series. We have done, for example, we've seen it briefly in Berlin, 3-day session with 40 German kids, so between 16 and 33. We did a climate camp where we now work on these ideas and want to bring them forward, give them a stage. So we try different things, and what we always want to achieve is not answering things, that is not our role, but starting questions, being curious, and also seeing what can come out of that. So that's the full purpose of the evening, that's the program, and we hope that you can, you follow us, that you like that, and you be as well as engaged. So thank you, and enjoy the evening.
I also want to give a little bit of context about why we're here at the MoMA, why partnerships matter, and a little bit about the Young Architects Program. And to do that, I want to invite Paul Budd, who is the head of global partnerships at Allianz, and also Sean Anderson, who is the associate curator in the Department of Architecture and Design at the MoMA. So let's give them a round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. Hi. Thank you for the introduction, Tony. Sean, don't be shy. Come on, get on the stage. I've been informed I have 3 minutes. I'll probably end up taking 5, so just bear with me for those extra 2 minutes. My name is Paul. I look after global partnerships in Allianz SE in Munich with the team, working very closely with Florian. And I would like to just spend a few minutes to explain why we're here, specifically in MoMA PS1. Ultimately, some of you may be having your first kind of physical, or for those that are streaming, digital interaction with us as a brand. Characterizing our business here in the US specifically, primarily we are an asset manager. We focus on asset management, on corporate business, life and annuities, real estate, and we do have a small retail business, but ultimately we are mainly a corporate and insurer and asset manager. Why is that relevant? Because ultimately we want that you have, that we leave a decent impression, that you have a great evening this evening, of course establish new connections, and really do have a lasting, we hope that we have a lasting impression on you. Ultimately, when we think about partnerships, of course there are a number of different reasons why we have them. If we think about the brand ecosystem, for example, the reason why we have partnerships is of course to create a dialogue and curate a dialogue, to create and curate dialogues with consumers, with partners, with vested interest groups, with local governments, with national governments, to help give ideas, create ideas for, to support and add momentum to the brand ecosystem. And as we know, at the heart of the brand ecosystem are ideas and ideals. And if we can give those ideas purpose, clarity, and context, then those ideas can ultimately manifest into the human and universal truths that are shaping decision-making today, but also will shape decision-making in the future. Unfortunately, as it's already been mentioned by Tony, we did lose the metaphorical chess match with the weather gods. But I hope that you saw that interesting, intriguing structure that I think you would have walked under as you came into the MoMA, which is part of the Young Architects Program, winning design, winning structure from Pedro and Juana. And that particular program is something which we're very pleased to be supporting the MoMA on as we move forward. Some of you will be aware that we've had a partnership, a relationship with the MoMA for several years now, historically focusing on contemporary art. 2018 was characterized by our sponsorship of the Boris Kingerli's City Dreams, an incredible sculpture who conceptualized a more harmonious society. And we were very proud, and I think we did the programming justice as I look to my friends and colleagues from the MoMA. But if we look at new partnerships, of course, we are looking to elaborate on the content and find let's say, a clearer strategic theme between what we're trying to do as a brand, but also connect it to the strategy of the group. And of course, it gives us pleasure to announce today, with immense pride, that we'll be extending the MoMA partnership to 2021, focusing on design and innovation. The Young Architects program, and I'm sorry to steal a little bit of your thunder, Sean, is part of that programming. But I do have to say thank you to the team of the MoMA, Jessica, Todd, Megan, and Anna, for helping us find what I think is a really compelling new strategic narrative and strategic theme, which really speaks directly to two things that our group, that the Allianz Group is trying to achieve. Firstly, it is to shape the ecosystems of the future, whether it's mobility, whether it's cities, or whether it's health, as an example. But the second thing is that by 2050, Allianz wants to be a carbon neutral organization. And I certainly think that with the new thematic topic, the new thematic environment that we find ourselves in, which is going to be focusing on envisioning a more sustainable future, I certainly believe that we can work together to achieve that goal. So I will hand over to Sean.
Good evening. Thank you, Paul. I also have to echo my thanks to the amazing work that Jessica, Anna, Megan, Angela Godding here at PS1, and everyone at development at MoMA does on a daily basis to make remarkable events like this one happen, but also remarkable events like MoMA's and MoMA PS1 Young Architects program happen. It's a great privilege, it's a great honor to work every year to basically make an architect or a group of architects' dreams happen. This is what I do. It's a wonderful job, it's a wonderful opportunity to imagine possibilities. And I'd like to think that the Young Architects program, since its inception 20 years ago, this year is the 20th anniversary, has always been about taking a measure of the now. How do we take a measure of the now? What does it mean to think about the present and the future at the same time, especially when it comes to the built environment and architecture? Because these things, these connectivities, these ideas that all of you share in your own worlds and in your own interests actually find housing or shelter within architecture, within space, within the buildings and urban situations that we find ourselves in. And yet that tension between architecture, between cities and non-cities, between citizens and non-citizens, as the case may be in certain places, is one that is ever increasingly important, and very much at the heart of what we try to accomplish and think about when we start every year a new iteration of the Young Architects program. So what I thought I would do this evening is to share with you just a few images of past installations here at MoMA PS1, talk a little bit about why each one won, as it were, and I think more importantly, what each of these projects signify for us today and going forward into the future. So I always have to include one of my dear friends and favorites here, Jenny Sabin, which was 2 years ago. And I'm going to go very fast with different views and ideas towards what it means to make a sustainable, temporary architectural installation. This one by WorkAC, PF1, Public Farm 1, has long been considered a very important one because they literally built a farm that was elevated above the courtyard and could be accessed on a regular basis. The vegetables and plants that were used here then were distributed to schools throughout Queens. This project, Party Wall by Coda, is a great example of materials being repurposed to make a new kind of architecture, a new kind of structure. These are, in fact, the discards of a skateboard manufacturer in Brooklyn. This fantastic project, mycelium bricks, the bricks of which now are featured in the MoMA permanent collection. These are bricks made out of literally organic material grown from mycelium and then formed into an architecture that is both incredible, spatial, tall, but also incredibly lightweight. This project I wanted to include just as a kind of contrast, because Young Architects program is an international endeavor, one in which I get to move around to different places. So this one in Maxi in Rome. This is a garden made very inexpensively, hydroponically grown flowers that were kept alive in the heat of a Roman summer for about 6 months. Or this very simple, very elegant intervention into the courtyard about 4 years ago by a Mexico City-based team. These are the discarded ropes that are used in a number of industries throughout Mexico, now repurposed as a very thin, if you will, kind of structure or sheltering system. Or in Korea, this beautiful structure that is made out of the, how should I say, the husks of wheat that are then made into a screening system under which there was a garden. This project, called Cosmo, has been seen in various contexts. It actually is a giant machine for purifying water. Jenny Sabin, a different view, just to give you an idea of the kind of complexity that we're talking about here. These are robotically woven and knitted textiles that are biometrically and biorhythmically defined. So the patterning that you see here, the stalactites that are falling from the sky, as it were all derived from organic-based pattern making, as well as organic synthesizing with the materials themselves, that when, during the day, they formed this amazing shelter and structure, and by night became bioreactive and would light up the night with various colors. And so these were threads that were literally embedded with color that would appear as the day into the night formed. And then lastly, I don't have a picture of it because I hope that all of you will come to a warm-up on the weekend sometime this summer to see Orama Rama, forgive my Spanish, but by Pedro and Juana. This is a structure that is made out of the most ubiquitous material that we see in New York City today, scaffolding. What does it mean to repurpose, reuse materials that we see every day and make something wholly new? And I think that this is what the possibility and the potential of architecture, architects, designers, and thinkers like all of yourselves can accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you, Paul. To continue the conversation and also the diverse perspectives around future cities, sustainable cities, our film team last week hit the streets of New York. They talked to people. They asked them questions around what does sustainable urbanization mean to them? What is it that they want to see happen in their cities? What is it that they want to see happen in their buildings? So I want to show you a video about what people had to say.
Sustainable architecture shouldn't only be about making it as efficient as possible, but it should also be like as less impactful to the environment.
How do you make sustainability economically affordable, so it's not just for the millionaires, but it's for the common people?
Public housing and assistance, it's not very affordable anymore in New York.
They have to live 2 hours away, take a train in to work. That's not sustainable, a different type of sustainable.
What works well?
Things like green roofs.
Rooftop gardens.
Put a windmill up here, put some solar panels, that's awesome. Keep going. Make it greener, make it easier for us to live in the city.
Solar panels are a great solution because they are green energies, no pollution, and very safe and sustainable.
Good installation in an apartment minimizes energy waste.
Windows, air conditioning units, things like that. A lot of those things could be made to be more sustainable.
The more green space that we can add to the city, the better off we're all going to be.
There should be areas where there is natural space instead of just having rows and rows of concrete buildings.
Large buildings with atrium spaces that have greenery.
It's wonderful to have the opportunity to explore the green spaces that we do have, like Central Park, like the High Line, so that we're able to have that space to connect with nature.
I would much rather live in a building that has been designed to be highly energy efficient.
The future of sustainable architecture is all that we are going to have moving forward, because if we don't make these changes, the Earth is going to be in some serious trouble.
We need New York City in itself to go green. Go green.
All right, so I'm really, really excited about our next guest here to give us a macro view about some of the challenges our cities are facing globally and also in New York. He is the director of New York City's Office for UN Habitat, which is the United Nations agency that is currently working on affordable housing and also sustainable urban development. I want to give a round of applause for Christopher Williams.
Thanks, Tony. And thanks to both Allianz as well as MoMA and MoMA PS1. Real honor for us from the UN to be here today to talk not only about the specificity of what we just heard in the New York context, but to try to broaden that to a wider context and how these very issues of affordability, greenery, commercial viability and identity, public space, are not just confined to New York. These are really issues that cities around the world, people around the world are struggling with. I want to emphasize that struggle is very different in different contexts. Right now, we're looking at Southeast Asia and South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa as the fastest urbanizing parts of the world, primarily because they were the most rural until recently. The global shift crossed the 50% mark around 2003. But by 2050, 75% of the world will be living in cities. And that shift, as I said, are taking place in these two regions at such great speed that cities are literally doubling in 25 years. So a city that's 2 million people becomes 4 million in 20 years, becomes 8 million in 40 years. So imagine the sustainability challenges in those kinds of contexts. And often in those contexts, it's not accompanied by what happened with the urban experience in North America and Europe of industrialization, where there were opportunities for employment in cities, there were opportunities for job creation, tax revenues, et cetera, to manage rapid urbanization. So not only is this urbanization happening at great speed, but it's also happening in the absence of a viable economic strategy. So what do you have? You have informality. Informality at a scale that is incomprehensible. 20 to 50 to 80% of cities in most of sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia are informal. Some are very dense and very poverty-stricken, and they are what we would use the term as slums. Others are informal without basic services, where people obtain services, they obtain infrastructure through informal means, through small-scale entrepreneurs, which can sometimes mean access to basic services. Other times it can mean great exploitation, both in those that provide the services and those that receive them. So we have a very complex situation. Layered on top of that, rapid urbanization, and in some cases the absence of economic growth, is massive climate change. As you've heard in this previous session and other colleagues, and I'm sure you know from your own experience learning more, we're talking about the next 15 years as make or break. Are we going to hit and retain the 1.5% increase in temperature, or is it going to slip to 2, 2.5, God forbid 3? If that's the case, if we're anywhere above 1.5 and we miss this next 15 years to make fundamental changes, we're looking at coastal cities, which represent over 70% of the world's cities, of having sea rise. Sea rise of 1 meter to 2 meters to 3 meters, which means the dislocation of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people within 2 generations. And you can imagine the people that are going to be most affected, the very people I was just talking about who are living in informal settlements and slums, that don't access basic services because they're after cheap rent, because their basic income is so low. So they're going to live where the rent's cheapest is going to be in the most vulnerable areas. So they're going to be the most affected by this situation. And dislocation and migration will be massive on a scale that you can't possibly imagine. So what does this mean for planning? What does this mean for architecture? What does this mean for the future of our cities? It means a very deep rethink about what is it that we do as professional architects, as planners, as individual consumers. How do we participate in this larger conversation? How do we get involved not only in our own city, but in networks of cities, which are springing up at rapid context in the absence of central governments around the world really supporting the changes that I'm talking about, or recognizing the significant problems. Those city networks, professional associations, architects, planners that are also linking together are starting to have conversations that they've never had before because of the magnitude of the problem. Taking a step back from all of what I've just said, I'd like to emphasize that the United Nations is doing its part by trying to be much more systematic in how it looks at the concept of sustainability. In 2015, it came up with what's called the Sustainable Development Goals. For some of you, this is the first time you're hearing me use those terms. For others, you may be taking it for granted. But companies, countries, cities, organizations around the world are starting to take stock of what happened when 190 member states in 2015 decided that there will be 17 goals which the world will work towards between 2015 and 2030. In those goals, which run a wide cross-section of education and health, basic services, environment, you name it, it's across the board, including cities and communities. What is common is 3 notions of sustainability. One notion is the one that we're most familiar with, which is environmental, ecological sustainability. A second is social sustainability. You heard in the presentations here from New York, they're not just interested in green. They want an affordable city. They don't want a city where people are dislocated, where they have to commute 2 to 3 hours to be taking advantage of the opportunities that the New York City provides. And thirdly, economic viability. Any kind of strategy for climate change action, any kind of initiative that's going to deal with inequality has to be commercially viable. Otherwise, you're not going to bring in the large-scale investment that's required to make the changes that are possible. And in this country and many other countries, it's not necessarily going to come from the public sector. There's not an appetite for massive public investment or public sector initiatives that are basically led from a central source. It's going to come from innovation from the private sector. And that innovation is already happening. I'm working constantly with companies that tell me we not only have understood the Sustainable Development Goals, but we are organizing our 50-year strategy towards achievement of sustainability in 3 of the 17 goals. And they've signed up for that because they're aligning those sustainability goals with their core business. So I think there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of opportunity that's emerging. I will just end briefly because I'm getting the cue from Tony. Tony's good at keeping us on top. 5 minutes. Oh, I thought you said stop. I'm halfway. Then that means I can shift to New York City with a little bit of granularity. I think I'm originally from New York, and I love this city, and for me it's the center of the universe, as it is for most who've grown up in New York. What I'm impressed about with New York is an enormous amount of pride in the city and in the space. And these kind of pictures that we were seeing in terms of architectural design, the kind of innovations that are happening in green spacing, the public space commitment that the city has, the concern that New Yorkers have about affordability as a common understanding just on the street as we've seen, and the economic vibrancy, all these things come together in New York City. New York City is unique because it is the first city in the world to establish the grid. In 1811, the first grid in the world was established in New York City, and it anticipated the growth of the city with avenues and streets. So public space, the public space ratio of New York City is among the best in the world. In the United Nations, we rank cities based on their density and their use of public space. And New York, not just because of Central Park, but because the way the avenues and streets are designed is remarkable in terms of basic thinking. So I think New York has had that tradition of good planning. New York also has a vibrant activist community. It has a lot of its heart here in Brooklyn, but it was also part of the tenant associations that came up in different parts of the city, particularly the Lower East Side. And that has maintained a level of accountability on whoever is controlling the city, whether it's big capital or it's the municipal authorities, the city government, or Albany, state government. There is a level of community organizing, there's a level of concern on the part of the average New Yorker that you don't find the rest of the world. And this, I think, lends itself to a level of accountability and control where issues are publicly debated. Often local developments are contested. There is a level of public airing. It can be frustrating for a developer. It takes time, but it does lend itself to an environment where there is a level of community organizing, a level of public awareness that doesn't exist in the rest of the world. Lastly, I think the kinds of creativity that are happening from the architects and the planners are extraordinary. If you think of the speed at which different neighborhoods in New York change, it's an incredibly vibrant place. Lastly, New York City is partly vibrant because it's accepting of migrants. It has been for many, many generations. 30% of New York City has always been people who are not born in New York City. It's the envy of the rest of the world because it has that vibrancy that migrants bring in. And this is a time, and I think a lot of you know what I'm saying, that appreciation for migration and diversity has never been as more important as it is now. We're in times, not just in the United States, but globally, where questioning diversity, blaming people because they're different, is becoming the order of the day. And a level of politics and populism are surrounded by that, where people gin up those differences in our society to get elected to stay in power, is now in vogue. In the United Nations, we're totally, totally committed to multilateralism. We feel that it is an antidote to this kind of approach, this way of thinking. And we embrace diversity in all its forms. With those final remarks, thanks, Tony, thanks, Allianz, and thanks, MoMA PS1.
I think that's a beautiful setup to hear and listen to what is happening in New York City. I'd like to introduce our next guest. He's from the New York City's mayor office, Youssef Khalid.
Thank you so much, and thank you again to MoMA PS1, to Allianz, and to all of you for being here. My name is Youssef. I represent the mayor's office, and in particular, the mayor's office of the chief technology officer. Our primary aim is to make technology work for more New Yorkers and to be accessible to more New Yorkers, and we feel that technology has, in fact, a primary role to play in sustainability. And before I get into that, I'd love to use a couple of framing devices for the way the city thinks about sustainability. I think the video that was shared earlier, asking New Yorkers what they think about when they think about sustainability, was great. It would have been great to interview someone drenched in sweat on the subway to also get their input, as I usually am. But one thing to note about New York is that sustainability is personal for us. We are a coastal city. We are a growing city. And we've been a city that has been, in some cases, on the cusp of major climate changes and climate action. Hurricane Sandy was sort of the biggest event that we've had in some time in 2013, and so it's really personal to us and our institutions. The second thing to note about New York is that in keeping with the mayor's vision for the city, we want to be the fairest city in the country and the fairest city in the world. So in thinking about sustainability, these are two things that we want to think about. Now, you know, in keeping with the theme of exploration and the Explorers program, I want to explore two principles for sustainable cities that are sort of obvious but important, and then one that's not often talked about. The first principle is that we believe that sustainable cities center climate. Sustainable cities center climate. And so how that's manifested itself in New York is we, number one, committed to 100% carbon neutrality by 2050. We also put our money where our mouth is by committing to divest our fairly large pension fund from fossil fuel stocks. We passed an action related to procurement through an executive order whereby the city will no longer purchase single-use plastics which harm the environment in manners that we haven't seen before. And so that's what it means, just small actions where sustainable cities need to center climate. But similar to what's been discussed before, sustainable cities need to rethink transportation. What that means in New York City is interesting. First, it means, at least on the city side, looking at public transit that we control, like the bus system and the streets, and speeding up our buses, in particular, a mode that a lot of working people use. It also means investing in infrastructure that allows for mode shift, so shift away from not desirable modes to walking and biking, building out greater infrastructure in that. And it also means for consumers, for residents, for folks who own vehicles, building the infrastructure for them to transition away from fossil fuels. So our office partnered with Mayor's Office of Sustainability, with DOT, with others, to begin testing actually lamppost charging so that you actually have a more seamless way of charging your vehicle. And so that's transportation. But the final area where sustainability, I think, hits close to home for us and where we think about a little bit differently is a sustainable digital life, a sustainable digital life. And so that starts with security. I'm proud of the fact that the city has an extremely strong cyber command team led by our CISO that is working on securing the city's infrastructure and putting out tools and solutions free of charge to New Yorkers so that they can secure their phones, their mobile devices, et cetera. It's also meant for New York City investing $100 million through our Economic Development Corporation in making this city a hub for cybersecurity. First, on the job side, so investing in training programs for New Yorkers who want to jump into the field to do so. And also on the economic development side, so bringing in startups, businesses who want to innovate here and who want to put R&D dollars here. But it also means looking at those who can't afford to protect themselves. And so New York City has 240,000 small businesses who have been primary drivers of employment in the city. But they're behind the big corporations in terms of securing their systems. And so we launched a cybersecurity moonshot challenge several months back that's designed to democratize cybersecurity solutions for small business. The final area where this matters to us and where we've partnered with UN Habitat is actually securing digital rights and focusing on that as a measure of sustainability. We launched the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, a coalition led by New York City, Barcelona, and Amsterdam to, number one, assert what a resident's digital rights are universally around the world, to think about what it means to have free and open access to the internet, and connectivity in a manner that you can relate to. It means defining what it means to be safe online. And it means coming together, sharing tools, sharing playbooks, sharing our collective weight as global cities to ensure that one's digital life is also a sustainable life. So I'll leave you with this. I think sustainable cities need to start with climate and center climate in their planning, in their direction, in their investments. They need to rethink transportation, as we've discussed a ton, but they also need to think about the digital realm and how to secure and sustain our digital lives as well. Thank you so much.
Wow. I want to also now bring on another perspective to layer on the conversation. And we're going to listen to the role of real estate in urbanization, and also what are the challenges and the changes that are happening in the industry as we move towards more sustainable cities. And to do that, I'd love to introduce Christoph Meyer, who's part of Allianz Real Estate.
Thank you, Tony, and welcome, explorers. My name is Christoph Meyer. I'm the head of risk and portfolio at Allianz Real Estate of America. And I want to give you some insight today to what the role is that real estate plays when it comes to sustainability and how we look at sustainability. So let me give you a little introduction on what Allianz Real Estate does. We're one of the largest real estate companies in the world. We manage 72 billion of real estate assets, dollars, I have to say, worldwide, on behalf of the Allianz insurance companies. And we have sustainability on our radar screen, and it's pretty important for us. So I spoke to Tony prior to the event, and I had the impression that he was a bit afraid that my presentation would surround a lot about numbers. He was right, but I think those numbers tell a pretty interesting story about the role that real estate plays in the context of sustainability and climate change. So in New York State alone, there's $3 trillion of assets that are vulnerable to climate change. What does that mean for Allianz as an insurance company and for Allianz Real Estate as a real estate company? So just imagine how much you would have to charge a policyholder for, let's say, a flood insurance in case those climate risks would really materialize. There would be no one who could afford insurance anymore, which would definitely hurt our business on the insurance side. In effect, that would lead to the fact that there would be less capital to be invested in real estate. And on top of that, due to the climate risks like flooding and storms, our real estate portfolio would also be exposed to those climate-related risks. So the bottom line is, it will not only affect us as an insurance company or a real estate company, but it will impact every one of us here. And talking about the city here, major parts of Manhattan would be literally underwater. So while real estate will be significantly impacted by climate change, it also is one of the main contributors to carbon emissions. So in New York City, real estate, or I have to say buildings, contribute 2/3 of the total carbon emissions in New York City. So that's one of the reasons why we have huge potential to contribute to sustainability by just reducing the emissions that our buildings produce. Allianz, it was mentioned before, committed itself to reduce its carbon emissions to 0 by 2050. And there's 3 strategies that you can use for your real estate portfolio to achieve that. That's either getting into renewable energy, that's to invest into sustainable buildings, or you can buy offsets or invest in asset classes that have a negative carbon footprint. There's also major challenges for us because sustainable buildings are not always available, especially in smaller markets. Same goes for renewable energy. There's no renewable energy available in New York City, at least not 100%. And also, even if sustainable buildings or sustainable energy is available, that doesn't necessarily mean that your tenants are willing to pay more for this renewable energy or higher rents for sustainable buildings. The biggest challenge, though, is that we can't really achieve the goal of carbon reduction by ourselves. So we need every one of you to be an advocate and to go out there to engage people, to engage your landlords, to engage your employers. And I think together we can make great difference and work towards a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Okay. I want to go back to the original question in the opening. How can we design our cities to foster more sustainable ways of living? And I hope that we can all agree that there's not a one right answer, or that we need, that there's not a right answer, and that we need to have diverse perspectives, that we need to work together across industries, across practices such as architecture, communities, entrepreneurship, policies, and that we all have a role playing to reduce the effects of climate. So I want to shift this a little bit, and we've heard a lot of the challenges that our cities are facing right now, but let's also listen to some of the projects that are happening in the ventures that are also happening today around sustainable communities, about building sustainable living, and also sustainable architecture. So let's see who they are and what they're working with in this video.
My name is Bahij Chansey. I'm the Senior Manager for Development here at Green City Force. Green City Force is a private, nonprofit AmeriCorps organization. We train young residents of public housing in New York City for green jobs across lots of different industries, trying to move this city and public housing at large toward a more sustainable community.
My name is Amanda Weeks, and my company, Industrial Organic, derives organic chemicals and ingredients from food waste while providing infrastructure to cities to handle organic waste.
My name is Eric Corey-Fried. I'm an architect, and I help people get to zero carbon in their buildings. I think my definition of sustainable architecture keeps evolving, but as of right now, I think of it as us taking responsibility for our buildings. If we're going to bring something into the world, if we're going to build something, we're going to be responsible for it. We're going to look at the impacts that it's going to have in terms of carbon, in terms of energy use, in terms of operational use, in terms of the health for the occupants.
New York City has one of the biggest waste problems in the world. So that's why I started the company here. And I just started looking at food, then looking at food waste, and then it was just the right place at the right time. Many cities, including New York, had just started to mandate organic waste recycling. There's a huge demand right now, and we just so happen to have been working on this since the very beginning.
A lot of people talk about environmentalism and sustainability as something that needs to happen in the future, but we completely disagree. At Green City Force, we're very much about the direct action that needs to happen in order for us to transition public housing and New York City at large toward a sustainable economy.
The reason this is important is because buildings are killing us. We're having a profound negative effect on the planet, and buildings are one of the largest contributors to that. But if we can change our buildings, change our cities, and change how we live together, we can reverse some of that negative trend.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Thank you so much to Allianz and to MoMA PS1 for having us out tonight. Right now, in MoMA PS1, we sit a few blocks away from Queensbridge Houses, the largest public housing development in Northern America. It's home to 6,500 people. A lot of people underestimate the impact that public housing and its residents have on the city of New York, but Green City Force is here to change that. Green City Force is a nonprofit AmeriCorps organization that leverages service as a platform to train young public housing residents for careers in the green economy. While in AmeriCorps service terms, serving NYCHA communities, Green City Force young adults become the leaders that drive the change toward the green city that we wish to see. The New York City Housing Authority, which Green City Force works in very, very close partnership with, NYCHA, or NYCHA for short, houses 500,000 people across the city of New York. For a little context, that's larger than the population of the city of Atlanta. It's a city within a city. NYCHA comprises of 316 public housing developments across New York City's 5 boroughs. It's over 2,300 buildings. This enormous building stock to GCF represents an opportunity for climate action, resiliency, and for job opportunities. And right now, the young adults that live at NYCHA are unemployed in massive numbers, at 4 times the rate of their citywide peers. That's where Green City Force comes in. So GCF's big idea is to connect this high youth unemployment that exists at NYCHA Public Housing with the investments and movement toward the sustainable city at the city level and at the level of public housing at NYCHA. We believe that if the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, was formed today, it would work to connect low-income communities of color into this movement toward the green city. A couple months ago, Bill de Blasio released the One NYC 2050 plan, as was mentioned earlier. It's an ambitious goal to get our whole city toward a carbon-neutral state by the year 2050. Green City Force works to elevate young NYCHA residents as the agents that will be critical to that change. Green City Force is a dual impact program. We have impacts on both individuals and on the communities that those individuals serve. We start by recruiting young residents from NYCHA public housing. We recruit 18 to 24-year-olds who have high school diplomas or equivalencies into a 6 to 10-month AmeriCorps program. They come into our program in cohorts that are subdivided into teams, each led by a team leader, and enter full-time service with Green City Force. 4 days a week during their service term, they're out in the field in public housing communities across the city, performing large-scale, high-impact sustainability initiatives that make public housing developments more sustainable and more healthy. And 1 day a week, these young people are in classroom training in Green City Academy. There, they're gaining the eco-literacy, the job skills, and the certifications required to succeed in the green economy. When Green City Force Corps members graduate from our program, we help them enter a variety of sustainable industries. Many of them also work with Green City Force in our social enterprise programs that focus on energy efficiency. Now we have a growing network of 500 alumni who are working across the city on sustainable industries across all of New York. We make a really lifetime commitment to the young people that graduate from our program. So as they're coming out, we're continuing to monitor their job retention, their progress along a career pathway. And as they're growing and moving on to the next thing or transitioning to a new role, Green City Force maintains an open door policy so that people can come back, they can get the continued career counseling and the continued placement services that they need amongst our network of employer partners. Our graduates are at work all over town in all sorts of different things. We train for urban agriculture, horticulture, landscaping, greening. We train for sustainable construction. Here's Paul Philpott in his vertical hydroponic urban farm with square roots, and graduate Gaston Acevedo of the Electricians Union Local 3. We also train for energy efficiency jobs and waste management. Here's Salonia Thompson with Franklin Energy, our largest employer partner, and Domingo Morales, who's the Senior Organics Recovery Coordinator for the New York City Compost Project at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Now, while they're in service with us, Green City Force AmeriCorps members are being exposed to industries across this spectrum, so they can really look and find a passion for the career pathway that best suits their interests and their skills. In service with us, Green City Force AmeriCorps members are advancing our 2 flagship initiatives that work in public housing, Farms at NYCHA and the Love Where You Live initiative. Through Farms at NYCHA, Green City Force AmeriCorps members have built 6 large-scale urban farms across NYCHA properties in 4 boroughs. These farms serve as training grounds for our AmeriCorps members, and they also serve the local community, providing fresh produce in areas that have food swamps and poor public health indicators that are targeted under the mayor's Building Healthy Communities plan. These farms are resident-driven, and they work on an exchange-based model. In order to get produce from weekly farm stands, NYCHA residents either bring out their household compostables, and they can trade that in for fresh produce, or they can volunteer at the farm for 30 minutes and take home that day's harvest. They're led and often helped out by resident volunteers who help day-to-day operations and maintain the farms. And then cooking demonstrations and public programs help drive engagement at the sites and promote nutrition education. The impacts from these farms on the communities that we serve has been pretty impressive, with 56,000 pounds of organic produce making it into the hands of low-income NYCHA residents. We've also collected 13,800 pounds in exchange for that, saving the city money on that waste that doesn't then need to be shipped to landfills. Over 14,000 people have come out to visit our weekly farm stands, and with local partners, we've educated 2,400 K-12 students in nutrition education and farm activities. Our other major flagship initiative, the Love Where You Live campaign, is a resident-to-resident sustainability education initiative. By tabling and going door-to-door, building by building, through NYCHA developments, we're doing outreach, getting the education and the materials into NYCHA residents' hands so that they can make the switch to sustainable behavior choices. Green City Force Corps members do this as credible messengers, as young people from the communities that they serve with the same lived experience. Now, the focus of the Love Where You Live initiative has shifted as the city and NYCHA's priorities and sustainability have shifted, and we've gone along with that. We've worked on energy efficiency, distributing light bulbs to NYCHA residents with NYCHA. We've worked with the Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer, as Yusuf was speaking from earlier, on zero waste activities in Brownsville. We've done the first ever pilot of a door-to-door recycling pickup at NYCHA to make recycling easier for NYCHA residents. A lot of people don't know that 2017 was the first time that a lot of NYCHA residents got recycling facilities. Green City Forests were the people on the ground telling NYCHA residents how they can engage in the program and how to properly recycle. We also work with the Department of Environmental Protection here in the city to ensure that people aren't dumping oil down the drains, causing sewage backups and plumbing problems in NYCHA buildings. This initiative has reached over 40,000 people across 5 boroughs. We've swapped out over 13,500 light bulbs and collected over 8,000 pounds of recyclables. Now, partnership is one of our core strengths at Green City Forests. We work across levels. We work with national partners at the state level, down to the city and community level partners. Our fundamental partnerships with AmeriCorps, the Core Network, and the Service Tier Alliance elevate Green City Forests' service term model onto the national stage and bring us into the larger service term movement. The Farms at NYCHA initiative works with NYCHA, the Mayor's Fund, under the Building Healthy Communities initiative at the Mayor's level, at the Mayor's office. And the Love Where You Live Corps, or the Love Where You Live initiative, works with MAP, which is the Mayor's Action Plan for Neighborhood Safety, targeting the 15 highest crime NYCHA developments so that we're ensuring that our services make it to the people who need it the most. So with 500 graduates, thousands of residents reached annually, 80 Corps members engaged every year, and 6 farms, what's the next step for Green City Forests? We asked, what happens when you combine the place-based physical investments of Farms at NYCHA with the sustainability services and education of the Love Where You Live campaign, and arrived at eco-resiliency hubs, closed-loop, resilient systems on NYCHA property that benefit residents and the communities they're from. The eco-resiliency hubs are going to take a holistic view of the different social, ecological, and environmental impacts that interplay with a public farm on NYCHA property, through rainwater catchment systems that handle stormwater, waste management through on-site composting facilities, and possibly power generation through solar arrays. And we're going to continue to provide that accessible produce to NYCHA residents to ensure that we're serving people in the same way that we have, and really improve that through doubling the number of weekly farm stands and improving resident engagement. Now it's time to expand this initiative at scale. We worked to develop a replicable program that's in alignment with city, NYCHA, and international goals. We need to grow. Right now, we're speaking with our partners across public housing residents, core members, alumni, community stakeholders, and the academic community to develop a vision for the future. We know that we can build it. We know we need to go all in to do it. We're building the future, training the residents of NYCHA to be the sustainability leaders of tomorrow, and transforming communities through service. I hope that you'll get on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bahish from Green City Forests. I'd like to now introduce Amanda Weeks, who is the founder of Industrial Organic, which is one of the coolest startups right now that is tackling the sustainability issues. So let's give a round of applause for Amanda.
Thank you. Well, I'm honored to be your token female speaker this evening. Thanks, Allianz and MoMA. I am very excited to be here as a startup founder. Whenever I'm invited to speak at things, it's usually like a pitch format. So I have 3 minutes, which is really rude. And it's like very structured, and I also have a newfound respect for pop stars who have to sing their songs over and over and over again. So the fact that I have been invited to come speak to you for 10 minutes about sustainable living, just like a topic, is really exciting for me. But first, just to frame the conversation so you know who I am and why I'm talking to you, I'll tell you a little bit more about my company. So you may have heard about food waste. Anybody not heard about food waste? Okay, great. There's a lot of it. It's also a resource. So food waste is made up, food really, is made up of organic compounds. Specifically, I want to call out water. Food waste on average is 70 to 80% water. So we have a biorefining process that stabilizes and separates these organic compounds, and we have a roadmap of about 15 different products and ingredients that are derived from food waste, starting with a household cleaning product. So we're launching a multi-surface cleaner this fall. I actually just yesterday was presented the logo options from our design firm. So this is the front runner right now. So this is like super fresh, world premiere. So yeah, we're making a cleaning product from food waste, basically. And then on the other side of this, we're an infrastructure solution. So we are opening a distributed network of biorefineries, first in New York City, and then we will expand out to other cities in the US and around the globe. So basically, we are a circular economy business. We valorize everything. There are no byproducts. Everything that we take from food waste can be monetized, and then we're also providing a waste solution to cities. So anyway, enough about that. How many of you are really excited and hopeful about the future of the world? Okay, it's like what I thought. Because why should you be? This is a curated assortment of headlines from the last couple of months. You know, we're inundated with these all the time. And it can feel pretty hopeless and scary. And this one's my personal favorite because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think they mean raw cement, but like cement's really not the best, you know, descriptor for melting glaciers. But oh wait, there's a solution. We just have to plant more trees. It's great, awesome, we're saved. Oh wait, actually we're not. So is it too late to save the world? You know, I feel like we're, you know, it feels very, doesn't feel like great. You know, it doesn't feel like it feels like we're too late, or that's what everyone keeps telling us. And, you know, it's causing things like there are new things like climate anxiety and climate depression, climate scientists. I was just reading an article last week about climate scientists and how they feel because they're, you know, dealing with this every single day and no one's listening to them. And like, what can we do? You know, what do we hear all the time? It's like, don't fly, don't shower, don't eat, don't wear clothes, don't buy electronics, don't fart because it makes methane. And it's like, what are we, it's just so much, it's so overwhelming. And like, how are we as individuals really supposed to do something about this? Like, we know the government's not doing anything. And so it just creates this sort of like crushing feeling of there's so many things that I have to do, so many behaviors that I have to change, and like doesn't even really matter. And, you know, look at this kid, he's got no future. And, you know, what we're being told is that, yeah, it's up to us. We have to change our behavior. We have to do all these things. And the theme of individual responsibility. Where did that come from? Does this ring a bell to anyone? Has anyone seen this before? Okay. So this was a PSA that launched in the 70s called Crying Indian. And I know that it's 2019 and I should not say Crying Indian, but he was actually Italian. So, So this was launched by an organization called Keep America Beautiful. They started in the 50s, really started that approach of personal responsibility. You're responsible for your waste. This is your fault. And just so everybody is on the same page, can we watch the ad?
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
You feel pretty shitty right now, right? You're like, I need to do something. I need to stop littering. So there's a funny thing about that. So Keep America Beautiful and this whole initiative was actually funded by packaging companies and consumer products companies. Specifically in the 70s, when Earth Day started, when Earth Day started and people were trying to talk about plastics, like getting rid of plastics. And so Keep America Beautiful was like, no, we need to change the paradigm and tell people that it's their fault and not ours, and it worked. So maybe we shouldn't be thinking about it this way. Maybe we should be thinking about it or corporate responsibility. So like AirPods, for example. I bought them, I love them. Then I read this article and was like, oh my God, I'm the worst. Like, it's so bad. Like, they're gonna live forever. I'm just stuck with these now forever, even after they stop working. And like, damn it, like, well, I feel like I screwed up. But like, why should I go to hell? I didn't design it. Why doesn't Tim Cook go to hell? And so we're like, it's the sort of where it's like restrictive dieting. It's like you can't do everything. You can't cut everything out. Maybe we should be thinking about, thinking more about our purchases and doing the research and being educated. Like flying, like if you don't fly, that plane's still gonna go. So why don't you look into airlines that are doing something and fly with those airlines? Just make more educated decisions, but don't deprive yourselves of things. And pick the thing you're excited about. Straws really worked because it was easy. It was one thing. There were alternatives, and everybody got into it, companies and people. So here are a couple of suggestions. Totally overhaul your oral care. Toothpaste tabs, zero-waste floss, bamboo toothbrush. Bamboo is awesome, by the way. It's super sustainable, grows really fast, good for the soil, doesn't use a lot of water. Just replace everything with bamboo stuff. Bioplastics are bad, they don't degrade, there's no way to recycle them. It's a lie. But it's like not as bad as regular plastics. Stop using nonstick and waterproof stuff. That's really, really bad. If you want to read more about that, here's some headlines. But this is one of the things that scares me a lot. And I read an article a couple of years ago with this lawyer who's taking on DuPont and the fact that they knew all along this was really bad. He actually announced yesterday that he's coming out with a book. So if this really gets you should read his book. Use renewable stuff. Don't use plastic bags. Plastic bags are really my thing. I will carry home groceries in my arms before I use a plastic bag. So don't try to do too much. Pick your thing. Talk to your friends. Post on social media. To make this actionable, Package Free Shop is great. It's in Williamsburg. And thank you, Allianz, for being sustainable and not being evil and leading by example.
We got one more presentation for you guys tonight before we do a panel and get all your questions. And I want to introduce Eric Corey Fried, who is a sustainability disruptor, and he's also an award-winning architect. And he's going to talk about sustainable architecture.
Tony. Oh, cool. That's definitely not going to work. All right. Hi, everybody. How are you? How are your butts? Because mine is numb. Mine is totally... Thank you to Tony. Thank you to Allianz. Thank you to all the Allianz staff who have really hard to pronounce German names that I'm not going to try. I want to build on what Amanda said and kind of figure out where you are. So if the y-axis is we're screwed to, no, we're fine, totally good. And then the x-axis is, but I feel great about it, to I'm totally bummed out. Where are you? Who's, like, for example, who's in A? Yeah, we're screwed, but I feel great. Like, who's in that? You guys are weird. Okay. Who's in B? We're screwed, and I'm bummed. I haven't been out in months. Like, if I wasn't here, I'd be home rocking in the fetal position. Who's, a few of you? Oh, I'm sorry. Who's in C, where I feel great, we're fine. I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm here for the food. Like, who's here? The one guy in the back. Thank you for your honesty, sir. And who's in D, where, yeah, we're fine, but I kind of have my own issues going on. Like, I'm dealing with my own. Like, anybody in that? This guy? Give this guy a hug. Here's the truth of it. We're boned. We're totally screwed, basically. And I have to be the guy to say this all over the country. It's really weird. And I don't think of myself as a political activist type of guy. But holy crap, how can you not be when the world is literally on fire? Like, it's on fire, and everybody's like, yeah, it's fine, totally, it's cool. And I go all over the country. I mean, New York's, you're in a bubble, you know that, right? Like, it's really nice here, but the rest of the country, holy moly, like, it's like someone left the zoo unlocked, you know what I mean? And the solutions that they have are not working. And people are dumb. They're really dumb. I don't know if you know this. And they need to be told over and over into things that I think would be obvious, basically, and they're not doing it so good. And the difference is now we have all this beautiful data. Like, when I started 30 years ago, I had to, like, really argue with it. But now we have all this gorgeous data telling you this. But you don't need data because there are literal signs of the apocalypse going past you, telling you something's wrong. Well, that's loud. And now we're paying the price for decisions that we made decades ago. Nothing? Nothing? No laughter on that? Let me explain something to you. I don't know if you realize how much effort went into making this friggin' slide that I think you should appreciate a little more. I saw this at my daughter's school. And it bothered me, and I didn't know why at first. Tony, let me explain it to you. It says, don't give up. And the kid gave up. The kid totally gave up. But here's what bothered me. They hung it up. They put it on the wall. Like, way to go, kid. It wasn't my kid. I promise you that. So what am I here to, oh yeah. So what I'm here to talk to you about is the way we build buildings is stupid. You don't know this, but it is. Think about what we do. We mine valuable resources out of the earth. We put them on fossil fuel-based ships, and then we schlep them all over the planet. And when they arrive on the site, they're not assembled. They're not ready to go. They have to be put together by hand. Every single building is a bespoke prototype. Every single building is a one-off. And we've been doing it this way for 200 years. And if buildings were great, that'd be one thing. But they're not. They're gross and disgusting and toxic. And nobody regulates building materials. You can put any toxic crap you want in a building, except asbestos or lead paint. But anything else, yeah, totally fine. And job sites themselves are incredibly dangerous. I once stepped through a nail that went through my shoe, through my foot, and out the top. Yeah, that ruined your day, basically. And buildings are routinely over budget and over schedule, and this is just normal now. And where every other industry, productivity has gone up, in the construction industry, it's gone down. Because we've been doing it the same way for 200 years. So productivity goes down and labor goes up. And you don't need to be an economist to know that that's not sustainable. And now we make these materials all over the place, and their costs go up. So we can't control any of it. We're also the only industry that has a 37% waste factor. Think about that. Could you imagine if every time Apple made an iPhone, there was a third of an iPhone that they threw away? Like, that wouldn't happen. So choose your market failure. They're all terrible. Labor, waste, material, it's all bad, basically. And now is the time we need to fix it, because we need to build so much. I don't know if you realize it. We need to build the equivalent of New York City every 5 weeks for the next 33 years. That's how much is coming down the pike. I had an old architecture professor, and she used to say that you remember a building by how it makes you feel. And I really think that's true. Because that's how we talk about our buildings, right? So we need healthy buildings, especially because they are so toxic and they're making us feel sick. What we really need is a full disruption of the construction industry. But if you want disruption, it doesn't come from inside an industry, it comes from outside. Think about it. No candle manufacturer invented the light bulb. That's not how that worked, right? The post office didn't invent email. Like, it came from outside. So if you want to disrupt the industry, what it takes is new types of thinking. So that's what I do. I think about where we need to be headed. And if we're going to build healthy, abundant buildings for everybody, shouldn't one of our goals be that the indoor air is at least as good as the outdoor air, if not better? Shouldn't it be that the more time you spend in a building, the better it makes you feel instead of worse? So I made a list of all the things that I thought buildings should be designed around. And you might have additions. You can tell me. That's fine. Talk to me afterwards. But basically, first and foremost, we should stop depending on human labor, because every construction site has a shortage now. We simply don't have enough people to do it. We need to find a way to speed up construction and scale it in a meaningful way. We need to scale the assembly of that construction, given that probably half of you own 3D printers in this room. It looks like a pretty nerdy group, right? So we need to find a way to do that. And then we need to find a way to lower costs, because buildings are still super duper expensive. And then in addition to that, environmentally, we need to eliminate construction waste, which is the single largest number in landfill, right? We need to find a way to sequester carbon at the same time, which we have the technology to do. It's called trees, right? We could do that in a cool way. We need to find ways to reduce or eliminate carcinogens, because why are we still knowingly putting cancer-causing chemicals in a building in the first place? And finally, we need to increase the biodiversity that we're destroying. This is our mandate. This is our design program, essentially. Every building, especially the existing ones, need to go after this. This is their goal. Now, there's some cool things going on, right? 3D printing addresses some of these in a cool way, right? Prefabrication addresses a lot of these. This is why we're working with it as much as we can. Automated assembly, robots, that's in its infancy, but it's getting there. But it doesn't solve all of those needs. The only thing that does is nature. Think about it. We are not the only creatures on this planet to build. Lots of creatures build stuff, right? It's kind of vanity that we think we are. This is the paper wasp. It builds its nest in a matter of days. It takes wood pulp from local trees, mixes it with saliva, and makes a form of cement. This is the weaver bird. It builds its nest in a matter of hours. It takes local grasses, builds it in this cool tripod shape, and uses its own body as a tape measure. It makes the opening just big enough so the weaver bird can get in, but none of its predators. These are termite mounds. These disgusting little things build these things 14 feet high, and they dig little holes around and create a form of air conditioning through passive cooling. This is the silk-henge spider. It builds a cute little fence around its baby. Holy crap, that's amazing. This is the bagworm moth. It builds ziggurat, I don't know what to call this thing, that it eats its way out of. And this is my favorite. This is the little pufferfish. Now, he knows he's ugly. You don't need to make comments. And so what does he do to attract a mate? He makes a sculpture on the ocean floor. He uses his little flippers and his little fins. He picks up little seashells in his little beak, I don't know what it's called, and he makes a pattern on the floor, and when you zoom out, you start to see what it is, and it makes the females horny. I don't know what it does, but it's amazing. What are you holding on to here? We suck at this. We're terrible at building buildings. Sometimes it's pathetic, and sometimes it's catastrophic, but we're really bad at it. Nature is the key here. You have to understand that engineers and architects use brute force to solve their problems, you know what biologists use? Relationships. Isn't that amazing? Holy crap, that's what I want to do. So that's my big idea. And we call it, we call it prostruction. Prostruction is the opposite of construction. Nothing? What a tough crowd, Jesus Christ. Imagine if your building was alive, if it breathed, if it processed waste, if it produced its own energy. A building that would literally grow. And I know you're thinking plant-based, because that's what most people think, but it would actually probably be a hybrid of several different of nature's technologies. Coral mixed with bacteria mixed with mycelium, right? And I know this sounds like science fiction, but it's actually possible. That's the amazing part. Because for the first time in human history, we know how a zebra gets its stripes. We know how a leaf heals itself. We know how the firefly glows. And it's all possible through DNA. For the first time, human beings can easily, cheaply catalog, edit, and replace DNA, and the cost of which just keeps going down. It's a new field called synthetic biology. And it's really harnessing the power of nature as technology. Think about the possibilities. In construction, we use mass production. In prostruction, we could use mass customization. You wouldn't need lights anymore because the walls could glow like a firefly. Every building could be a LEED certified building inherently. Every surface could be a sensor for toxins. If you take a hook out of the wall could heal the way your own fingers do. You could even change the color of the wall based on your mood. Oh, it's Valentine's Day. Let's make the walls red. Go nuts. It's amazing. And you could even absorb VOCs or CO2 at the same time because nature already has those processes in place. And it's very much designed to work with existing buildings. I once did a $350,000 kitchen because, you know, rich white people. And 10 years later, they ripped it out. And they built a new one, right? So grow your structure and put in your IKEA crap, whatever you want. It's fine. We could even bake the building code itself into what we grow. So if you grew a stair, it would automatically have 8-inch risers. You wouldn't need building inspectors anymore. And nobody's going to miss them, believe me. It's amazing. Holy crap. And this thing's very much designed to change and adapt and grow over time. So imagine at every surface, a battery, a sensor, a heat sink. It's all possible. So who wants to start growing our buildings? Tough room. Thank you. 2 people in the back. This could shift that paradigm from cut, slash, and burn to grow, regenerate, and breathe. It's really harnessing nature for what it is, a technology. You've heard of better living through chemistry. This is better living through biology. And biology is strong. It's really powerful. That's the power of growing buildings. So let's grow our buildings. Let's grow beautiful, abundant, healthy, vibrant buildings for everybody, affordably. Look, if Tupac can put out 7 albums after he died, you can back me on this. You can, what the hell? In the time that you've been in this room, listening to all these wonderful people, your bodies have been a whirlwind of activity. In the time that you've been sitting here, seemingly still, your gross, disgusting bodies have exhaled 13 liters of CO2. You've shed 7.5 liters of sweat into the seats and the clothes, and you've shed 12 million skin cells on the floor and each other. It's disgusting. But imagine if the building anticipated that. Imagine if the building understood your physiological selfish needs and replenished you. If we could do that, wouldn't that be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Really? Wouldn't that be redefining the American dream for everybody? And frankly, wouldn't that make everybody happy? Tony's glaring at me, isn't he, because of my time. Okay, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Let's give all our speakers one more round of applause as we bring them up for the panel. So, what we're going to do next is we'll have about 15 minutes for panel and Q&A. I'm going to invite Sean Anderson back up on stage as he's going to be the moderator, and all our speakers as well.
Where shall I sit?
Why don't you go down?
feel like I have to stand up, but I guess I'll sit down. All right. We have a lightning round of discussion. I first, though, wanted to thank each and every one of you. I've learned quite a bit from everyone here. It's an odd thing to be a curator of architecture, but to get to meet with all of you on a stage and think about the future. So I am going to perform a little lightning round and ask each of you to say one word or one component or one tool that you as individuals, as thinkers, as producers, as makers, consider to be perhaps the most important aspect to have or provide or imagine a sustainable future. It's a hard one. I'm going to start with Eric first.
I think passion. If you're going to limit me to one word, passion, right?
One word, all right.
Let's instill
Good.
passion in people and what the future could be. Remember, they said you don't change an existing reality by fighting against it, you change it by offering something better, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. So let's instill that passion.
I would say innovation.
This is the technocrat in me, but a bike that anyone can use at any time.
I would say knowledge.
I'll go with collaboration.
I'd have to say energy.
Great. So what I was hoping was actually kind of what transpired here is that I think for each of us in this room, including these fine people on the stage, the notion of a sustainable future, in fact, sustainability itself, can reach and be imagined at so many different scales. And these scales that happen at the individual, the cellular, all the way up to the planetary are all relational. They are all systems. They are all productive in and of themselves, and yet depend on each of us as individuals, as we've seen, to think about what that means and to generate ideas around them. So I wanted to throw out some very broad, very relatively, I don't know, didactic questions, and then just hope that a few of you might respond. So I'm not going to ask each and every one of you a specific question. I think we would get bored with that. But I wanted to start with this idea that I remember as a kid when recycling was a radical act. It was something that only the hippies did down the street, and you didn't want to talk to them because they were weird. And they had solar panels on their roof that didn't work, etc. But we've reached a new stage, I think. I think, as Amanda said and Eric said, we are at the pinnacle, perhaps, of fear and the pinnacle of worry and anxiety in the world and in our cities. So what can we do? What can we do as individuals to change the ways in which we perceive our role in the world, in our communities?
So you said, how do we perceive our role in our communities? Is that what you said?
Well, no. What can we do as individuals to actually incite the change that might change other people's ideas of the community?
Yes. Talk to them. I think that, as I said before, knowledge, education, awareness is really important. There's a lot so many people don't know about, for example, recycling. Plastics are not infinitely recyclable. Our recycling is not being bought anymore by China. There's a whole real issue with that. So I think that spreading that knowledge and talking to people is key, because a lot of people don't really know sort of like what goes on behind the scenes in cities.
Go for it. One of the things that I like to do with projects, and I do it right at the beginning, is I say, what are the assumptions that we're all going to bring to the project? Let's talk about them, especially the unspoken assumptions. And it's amazing how many unspoken things go into a typical building or development. Everybody just assumes that it's going to be energy intensive. They assume it's going to be carbon intensive. Like, it never gets said. So I'm the guy that says that, like, let's put them on paper. And as the assumptions zoom out, we start with, do we assume we're going to have drywall? And everybody's like, well, yeah. Well, why? And it raises that question. Do we assume we're going to have air conditioning? Well, yeah, don't we have to? No, well, no, not really. And then as we zoom out further, well, do we assume we're going to have sick employees in the building? And they're, well, what do you mean? Because we can affect all of those outcomes. I can design a building that has fewer sick employees, higher productivity, higher test scores, but we have a lot of power now to do all that.
And I was thinking of the word resilience. We use these terms like sustainable and sustainability and resilience and organic and green and all of these kind of fashionable, if you will, terms, and they also have multiple meanings. They also have multiple connotations and scales that each of us are perhaps confronted with on a regular basis. Are there ways that we could perhaps rejigger how we understand these terms and actually tell someone who is a skeptic or a community that are skeptical, how do we change that? How do we change these minds in a way? Is it beyond the talking? Can we show data? Do we make something fancy that challenges the ways in which we see? I think your work is extraordinary to challenge the paradigm that social or public housing can be beautiful, and it can be cooperative, and it can be collaborative. But do you face resistance among NYCHA residents that this is possible?
Of course, there's always some skepticism when we go into new communities. But we've found that when we are on the ground doing the work and really showing people the results of the work, NYCHA residents can often be skeptical because they've heard things promised before that did not materialize. But when you go and you show them that you are going to commit to the things you've said, people really do start to buy in. And once a few people buy in, they bring in their groups and they bring in their networks, and that expands. In answer to the other question, though, I think the idea of social, economic, and environmental sustainability that Christopher brought up is really essential in bringing in more groups of people to this movement, where it's not just about restricting yourself from things, as you've said, but it's about showing people that environmentalism is also an opportunity for job development. It's also an economic boon to our cities.
Absolutely. And I would say to you, Christopher, you work for an organization, an institution that I have profound respect for, always have. When you are thinking about and working in other parts of the world, do these terms like sustainable or green or I don't know, any of the terms that we've looked at and thought about tonight, do these come up? Because my personal experience, they don't come up because many of these communities already are working perhaps unconsciously toward a sustainable kind of lifestyle or community-based program.
Kwa nini unafikiri ninaweza kufahamu wewe?
Okay.
It's a joke, but I just spoke to you in Swahili because there are about 1,000 languages that you have to wrestle with. So you can imagine we're having trouble with sustainability, resilience, and we're all speaking English. Yeah. So if you add to that hundreds of languages, it's really complicated. So how do we deal with this? We deal with this all the time. It's part of our MO. Yeah. And part of it is to just unpack what people are saying, as was mentioned by Eric, allowing people to explain what it is that they're talking about. We don't start moving 1,000,000 miles an hour with assumed knowledge. We really spend time to say, okay, what is it that how would you describe that term? For example, I met with some people from Guadalajara, Mexico today, about 6 hours ago. And she went on and on about territoriality. And I was like, whoa, okay. She goes, yes, we have to have balanced territorial development. We have to have territoriality. And you know, everybody in the room who wasn't from Guadalajara was sort of shaking their heads and saying, what the hell is that? What's going on? Where's that at? And we were all speaking English. It wasn't that she was speaking in Spanish and there was a translator. And so we spent the time, first part of the meeting, just going through what she meant. And when she described it, it took about 10 minutes. She was talking about sustainable development as we would. But for her, what resonated was the term territoriality. So I guess my first point is barriers of terminology, language can be an enemy, even in the same language, but we have to work with that, especially if we're in the context of not only an urbanizing world, but a radically transformative world where people who spoke the language that I just started with you on are actually increasing their knowledge of other languages, and we're understanding their language. So I think the world is growing smaller. That's an opportunity, but we need to be sensitive to how terms and concepts are used so that we get beyond those terms and not trapped by them.
Shukran bzaf. So I love this idea of language, right? This language that is both shared and universal potentially, but also unique to its user, to its speaker, to its culture, to its society. And I'm thinking that when we think about sustainable communities and sustainable ideas, we do have to also understand that there fundamentally comes a point where we have to respect each other. And that respect has to come from both ourselves as individuals and communities, but also, as you introduced earlier tonight, respect across the world, across borders that are in fact territorial and often militarized, unfortunately. I've had the great privilege of working and studying and thinking about refugee camps in very many parts of the world. And there you see resilience and great pride happening around the world despite the circumstances that these individuals are faced with. And it just leads me to think that maybe each of us, each of you in your remarkable works that we've seen this evening can generate, and each of you can begin to generate ideas of not only promoting respect for each other, for each other's communities across the planet, that perhaps that will start to generate the change that we need to see at both the micro level and the macro level. That's my little bit of speech giving, and so I wanted to open it up to any questions for all of these fine people on the stage from the audience.
I got to say thank you all for being here and speaking about these topics, but this question goes to Eric. I wanted to ask you, have you heard of Earthships?
Yeah, Earthships, for those of you that don't know, were started out in Taos, New Mexico by Michael Reynolds in the 70s. And that's what happens when you're in the desert with a lot of weed, right? And so he builds these buildings out of tires filled with dirt and trash cans and then plasters over them. And they're really quite beautiful. So not only have I seen Earthships, I've built 2 of them. And they're a pain in the ass. They're super labor intensive. But I love them. But they don't scale in terms of how do we house 9 billion people on the planet. But yeah absolutely.
The reason why I brought it up is because Earthships answer certain problems that everybody has. So food, water, shelter, energy, all encompassing where your rain goes, where your waste goes. It's all encapsulated, which is really interesting. And then there's zero water waste, and food's production inside someone's house is really attractive because people got to eat. And yeah, I just think of the possibility if it were to be scaled, they're using a lot of money and people and other industries. That's awesome for food, water, shelter to be encompassed in everybody's home to sort of level the playing field so people don't have to worry about that stuff universally.
Hi, thank you for all the speakers sharing, your amazing idea. My name is Natalie, and I have a question for Christoph from Allianz. So I'm curious to know, amongst, the real estate actors, real estate developer, do you consider yourself as a rare actor that promotes sustainability and manage, carbon transition risk?
It's a very good question. I would say yes and no. I think what we experience as a global real estate investor is that there's differences in different markets. So I think probably, and I hate to say that since we're in the US, but my impression is that Europe, or some European countries at least, are a bit more engaged in sustainability. So for example, when I look at our Swiss portfolio, there it's much more common that they build much more sustainable buildings. We just invested in one in Switzerland that was made out of wood, a residential building. At the same time, what makes me optimistic is that I see more and more also large institutional real estate companies really joining forces with us and really seeing the need for change. We have a lot of pension funds, also in the US, a lot of state pension funds like CalSTRS, who really, given the fact that they're basically managing government money, are probably obliged to do that, but I think that really can drive change. And that's what I love about my job, because we have impact on our business partners, we can engage with our tenants, and I think we can help push some more of some other real estate companies to really do what we are trying to do.
Could I add to that point really quick? So I think one of the tensions in the discussion today has been the balance of individual action and institutional action. And I think the point you were making at the end, and please correct me if I'm off from mansplaining, is you know, find your thing as an individual, but also it's not about institutions. Did I get it right? Or it is about institutions?
Yes.
There it is.
Yeah.
And so if your thing is lobbying your city government, your state government, your insurer, the places you invest in to move their money elsewhere, to move their actions elsewhere, that's a really powerful thing, because fundamentally this is an institution-driven crisis, and one that requires governments, big industries, investors, builders, to shift their movements and essentially the options that they offer to you as a consumer. So I think it's important to also consider the actions that you can have to drive institutions in a different direction.
One last question. I'm going to go here.
So hi, thank you so much. Very interesting. Even funny, you don't expect to hear funny, right? So that was nice and humor, and sometimes it's a rather dreary topic. So my question is more just, if you could pick one thing that you would say that you would want to change, your barrier to get to your goals, because you all have specific goals, what would you say it is? Like, what is your biggest obstacle? And if today you could just snap your fingers and it went away, what would it be? And this can be answered by anybody.
If I was king, I'd do away with all the fossil fuel subsidies overnight, the $100 billion that we spend on that, because then suddenly it would be a fairly level playing field. And then renewables could really compete and you know, not have that built-in disadvantage that they get right now.
I'd also add, I think making the climate movement more intersectional and more clear in the movements for decarceration and the movements for fair jobs and fair wages for everyone and the movements for health equality and better health outcomes among folks, so that this thing isn't, you know, last on your list of priorities for the day as an activist or as an individual, but in fact it's intimately tied to everything else you care about, you know, throughout your day and throughout your life.
I would say, well, for my startup specifically, access to capital. So we have a different type of business model where traditional debt and project finance doesn't really fit for us, or we're not ready for that yet, but then we also don't really fit venture capital. So we've had to be really creative with how we've raised money, and we've been pretty successful, all things considered, but there aren't a lot of vehicles for projects like this that are private, that are startups, to get them off the ground when you're not just like a software company.
I would say educate and engage. Imagine if everybody did a service term and they were kind of invested in their communities and they saw the change that that can create. I think a lot of people are not working from the same set of facts and from the same page. We see it now with half the country completely disagreeing with everything we did tonight. And I would say if everybody's on that same page and working together, we get somewhere better.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting back to the earlier part of the discussion in terms of how we change the perspective of this issue. I think that part of the presentations were doom and gloom, others were optimism, and the people were trying to gauge that. I think back to the story, this is told by many people in East Africa, of the company, the shoe company that went to Sudan in the early 1970s. And the president of the company decided to send 2 people. And so his first consultant went in, came back, and said, so what did you find? And he said, it's incredible. There's nobody wearing shoes. We can't go there. Second consultant comes back. There's nobody wearing shoes. We got to go there. Okay, so that perspective, that second consultant that came back, I think that's a lot of part of this discussion that we need to talk about with climate change and the kind of magnitude of the problem that I talked about before. On the one hand, you can present this as an impossible problem. You can also say, oh my God, this is creating enormous opportunity. If we look at 3,000 cities around the world that have 500,000 people in them that are going to double in the next 30 years, that could be frightening, horrible. It could also be, oh my God, what if the next 25 years investments were made in those cities to make them, along the lines that we've been talking about here, sustainable from different perspectives, from the socially sustainable, dealing with inequality, looking at building in a way that is very different from the last 200 years, as was discussed, and looking at an economic model that's much more viable. If that could be done in those 3,000 cities over the next 25 years, with 500,000 people or more, yes, they will be doubling in population, but there'll be places you'd want to go to. So how do we shift that conversation from this is impossible to wow, this is a huge opportunity? I think that getting that shift to happen, at least where I work at a global level, is very much where the Secretary General's at. And just a little pitch here, it's my boss. Maybe you saw him on the cover of Time magazine recently standing in a foot of water, sea level rising. He is holding an event on the 23rd of September, which will bring together 180 heads of state, along with captains of industry around the world, most of the activists that are involved, the scientists, as well as cities, over 75 cities, city representatives, to really put a priority on this issue, make it a New York moment. Try to look at the New York consensus rather than the old Washington consensus that was not very helpful. And I think this is part of what he's after, is saying not only is this a problem, but it's a huge opportunity. Thanks.
So, did you go ahead? No, I was just going to say to just sort of wrap up the event tonight here, I'd love to give a round of applause to all our amazing speakers and experts. And a huge thank you for all of you guys for joining us tonight. And the show's not over, because we're going to have a reception where you have an opportunity to connect with each other, to continue the conversation, to ask questions to our experts. And also, I want to say a big thank you to Allianz and MoMA for inviting us all to this event tonight. To that, the reception is going to begin now downstairs.